Wherever you're joining us from, a very good morning, afternoon, or evening to all delegates and distinguished guests. And thank you for taking time off your busy Fridays to join us today. My name is Haley, and I will be your MC for today. Since 2015, the Warwick ASEAN Conference has been about gathering youths from around the UK to discuss contemporary issues affecting the ASEAN region. Themed Resurgence, the 2021 edition of WAC will engage delegates in meaningful discourses revolving around the issues of the pandemic and its imminent impact on future job opportunities within ASEAN. Beyond the pandemic, at the end of our conference, we hope that you will leave us encouraged and inspired to continue working towards building a forward-looking ASEAN community and share the lessons that you've learned here today with your friends, colleagues, and peers. Before we begin, we would also like to inform you that parts of this event may be recorded by members of our team and may possibly be used for publicity material. Today's proceedings feature two sessions, which are the Youth Startup Panel plus a Q&A session, and a webinar on answering application and interview questions by Bright Network. Before we begin, let us watch a video showing us more of what you can expect from this year's conference.
The World Health Organization declares a pandemic.
Experts have warned the odds of a possible recession have increased.
The coronavirus outbreak has wiped more than $16 trillion off the global stock market.
As coronavirus spreads across the West, new signs of hope in Asia.
First of all, for the people who say that kids cannot do something, I'd say that we are the people who are going to lead the world in the future.
A phenomenon known as heat energy, which increases the temperature of Earth at an unprecedented rate.
It's not just a global health crisis, it is also a socio-economic crisis.
Thank you to our marketing team for producing that wonderful video to kickstart our conference. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank all of our sponsors and partners. Without their invaluable support, this conference would not be possible. Additionally, we would also like to thank the dedicated organizing committee, despite this year's challenges, who have worked extremely hard to bring us a lineup of incredible speakers, moderators, partner firms, and organizations. To formally commence the conference, we would like to welcome Ms. Tan Si-Chi, the Chief Coordinator of the Warwick ASEAN Conference 2021, to give her welcome address.
Thank you, Haley. Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as this year's Chief Coordinator, it gives me great delight to welcome you to the 2021 edition of the Warwick ASEAN Conference. No matter where you are today, I'm extremely grateful to all of you for taking time off your busy schedules to support our conference this year. The past year has been unprecedented and filled with unexpected changes like no other. Although the COVID-19 pandemic might have prevented us from meeting in person, we are thankful for the modern digital platforms available, allowing us to continue organizing our annual conference. For 7 years, WAC has provided a platform for youth from all around the UK to gather as a community and discuss contemporary issues affecting Southeast Asia, a region that many of us are proud to call home. The past year has allowed my team and I to truly understand that in every adversity contains seeds of opportunity and growth. While WAC continues to remain the largest student-led ASEAN conference, hosting delegates from renowned institutions across the UK, The renewed model of hosting a digital conference this year has allowed us to welcome delegates from all across the world. We are joined today by students from institutions all across ASEAN and beyond, including the Singapore University of Social Sciences, Goethe University Frankfurt, Renmin University, Universitas Gadjah Mada, and the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, just to name a few. We will be kickstarting this year's conference with a panel of young entrepreneurs who will be sharing with us inspirational stories on how they defeated the norm, took a leap of faith, and have each founded or co-founded startups, showing us that age is so much more than just a number. We are also pleased to announce that our partner, Bright Network, a career-oriented network for university students and graduates, will be helming a webinar today, as they share with us delegates important tips on navigating the world of interviews and applications. Tomorrow, delegates will get the opportunity to hear from professionals with multi-sectorial experiences, network with corporate representatives, and engage in meaningful discourses with our embassy representatives from across ASEAN nations. The theme for this year, Resurgence, aims to tie all of these activities together. Through the meaningful discourses and networking sessions, we aim to explore the ways in which ASEAN will emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, not merely as an organization that survives, but one that thrives. I hope that this conference will introduce new ideas, initiate productive conversations, and inculcate a shared sense of commitment towards building a progressive future together. With that, I wish all of you a productive and memorable conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Suchi, for your meaningful remarks. As you know, the Warwick ASEAN Conference is a conference started by Southeast Asian youths for youths everywhere to learn more about ASEAN and the happenings in our region. Each year, we invite inspiring youth representatives to share their perspectives on how we, as individuals, can make a difference to the Southeast Asian region and beyond. This year, we are proud to introduce our panel of youth speakers who will be sharing with us their insights into how they took a leap of faith and managed to seamlessly launch their creativity and passion for a specific cause into the business and commercial world. Our first panelist is Mr. Amir Hamza, a Warwick alumnus who graduated with a double first in pure mathematics and computer science, while being actively involved in empowering youths through various volunteering and speaking engagements. Mr. Hamza brings a wealth of experience in entrepreneurship through startups in sectors such as education and data analytics. Our next panelist is Mr. Kisam Chan. Listed under Forbes 30 Under 30, Mr. Chan is an entrepreneur who has utilized creativity to improve the world. He is responsible for the globally recognized social enterprise Rise Inc., an initiative aimed at putting an end towards the inequality, poverty, and wastage that is currently happening in the rice industry. Our final panelist, Mr. Calvin Wee, is described as a disciplined dreamer. Mr. Wee is currently devoting his time in hopes of securing an insurmountable connection between Southeast Asia and China. Mr. Wee recognizes that youths are the region's next leaders and is now utilizing his array of experiences to nurture ASEAN changemakers who share a similar passion to him. This session will be moderated by Ms. Hilary Yip, who is an entrepreneur, founder, and CEO of Minor Minus, which aims to build a global youth community that fosters language exchange. In the past, Ms. Yip has been invited to share her ideas on numerous platforms including TEDx, the 2019 HSBC Innovation Summit, and the Global Women Forum. Without further ado, let's warmly welcome Ms. Hilary Yip and our panelists, Mr. Amir Hamza, Mr. Calvin Wee, and Mr. Kisam Chan to take the spotlight.
Of military sanctions by the US and several other countries where some of our investors are based in for rising. So to be honest, we don't really have an answer as to where we're going right now, but we're figuring it out. So that's part of the entrepreneurial experience. You face like problems, but you try and find solutions for it. And I'm really keen to hear what the other panelists have to say about their journeys in the past couple of years.
So, Amir or Calvin, feel free to weigh in. Yeah, so maybe let me share a bit more as well. So, my story is a bit different from Isomari because I actually started in the midst of the pandemic. And as entrepreneurs, we are usually quite optimistic. We didn't expect it to last so long. So we began starting off with online webinars. And as meant for similarly for us, right, because we have presence now in Singapore, Malaysia, Myanmar, Indonesia, and Cambodia. The recent pandemic has really hit us very hard. We expected to go offline for events um, in the fourth quarter of last year, but that didn't happen. And the recent military coup has made it harder. And fun fact for us was Myanmar is actually our first overseas chapter. It was the first one we had. We had a lot of interesting plans planned out for Myanmar. A lot of it has been stopped for now. But I think we're keeping our heads up high. We are still hoping for the best. And in the meantime, we're planning to use the virtual platform to link our members together and also to see how we can create virtual programs, maybe like internships or mentoring programs for the time being until things get better. But I think also because of this pandemic, it's also allowed us to scale a lot faster because using technology, a lot of things that you do offline can be done a lot quicker online. That has expanded our reach and scale in the recent months because of this as well. So it's mixed bag of both blessings and problems that we're facing with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on my kind of end with education equate, we were working with tutoring and education, and there are two things to say here. The first kind of important point to note is that obviously education has shifted hugely to being online, and I'm sure a lot of you in your lectures are kind of finding that out today. And that monumental shift in how it's functioning actually helped us a lot because we were in that transition. I thought it would have happened anyway. I just think it's been accelerated in almost catalyst-like mechanism by COVID. I think secondly, with Asia Pacific, there was huge opportunities here for education. APAC is the fastest edtech growing area, Asia Pacific as a region, especially ASEAN as well. And it's going to have huge opportunities. Perhaps some of these are cultural reasons, perhaps it's to do with technology and uptake, but irrespective, there's huge growth there. I suppose one thing to ask you, Hilary, is kind of with minor minors, how has that been changing, and how has COVID impacted that?
So COVID has affected minor minors in a way that we didn't initially foresee, because since we're especially about edtech and being online, we initially expected that we would be able to get a lot more users by this. But due to the pandemic, we've had the very human issue where our developers have encountered many, many different problems. So we've effectively been stalled for over a year, and we're still finishing up on our second version. When I first signed up to this, I think mid last year, we were already expecting to have been launched by that point, but due to the pandemic, it's just been pushed back pretty much indefinitely for the time being. We're nearing the end, but that's generally how we've been affected. Otherwise, the edtech, as you said, has been clearly been having a good trend, and I think that irrespective of how the pandemic ends, there are tangible benefits that it has shown, and therefore you can pretty much expect that this will continue no matter what. Okay, so on to our next question. I think that one thing we should always look at for startups generally is that it very much matters about the person who's doing it and what as individuals we do and our approach to innovation. On that note, I'd like to ask how you started your business and what was the sparking, the moment where you've decided to become an entrepreneur.
Maybe I can go with this. I think for me, it's very interesting. So my epiphany of doing this startup was when I was in Shanghai. I was doing a year program, so work and study program with Fudan University in Shanghai. And I realized that, in a Chinese university classroom, I learned so much more about ASEAN. I'm not sure for you guys in the audience, are you aware that ASEAN has an anthem, right? We have an official ASEAN anthem. I studied 16 years in Singapore. I didn't realize that, right? It's only until when I reached China and I realized so many things about China that I didn't know before. And then that made me realize that, if despite ASEAN being our backyard, there's a lot of lack of knowledge and awareness of the region, and especially between ASEAN and China. So I came back and did this, right? Because it's a huge problem to solve, because looking at macroeconomics, it's very, very clear that, ASEAN and China is a very important region. There's a lot of growth, there's a lot of young people in the region, and but there's also a lot of lack of understanding of cultural awareness, of how each country works and the nuances. And this is what we hope to solve with our programs. Hopefully, through our programmings and our entire process, the members in the young seekers will be able to be well versed, not just in their home country, but also in the region, so that they can tap on the opportunities. So for me, it was really that epiphany that I had in a classroom in China that made me start the young seekers.
On my kind of end, my first startup, I was just 19 years old as the end of my first year. Really, it was driven by knowing that career is going to be a huge part of my life. We wake up every single day, 9 to 5. In the proportion of your waking day, the career that you pick is going to be huge. So it was really just an experiment. It was like, do you know what? This could be it, and I want to just try it out and try something. Often most startups fail, but the amount that I learned from Just 11 Plus, which is the initial startup, we hired an office, we hired teachers, we had investment. That entire process of learning and finding out taught me a lot about business, helped me get into McKinsey and lots of other stuff like that. But secondly, the really fundamental thing was it taught me what I actually like and what I value about the world. Like, what do I care about and what do I actually want to spend my life doing and have an impact on this small planet that we live on? That was the biggest thing for me. And I think that was the personal driver. And if you are thinking about startups, the best advice I can say is just try something, put something out there, put something out into the real world and start doing tangible stuff. That's the biggest advice. If you go to Y Combinator, they'll give you just try, do something, give yourself 4 weeks, go out there, put something out and test your product and get user feedback. And that's probably the biggest thing I'd say is just go and stop having your imposter syndrome.
Nice. So my story is also I founded RiseSync when I was in my second year of university, and all it was simply an idea that me and a couple of friends came together to form for a business case competition. And the only reason why I was taking part in that was because I needed something to add to my CV to hopefully one day get into a consulting, well-paying job, right? That seems to be a general trend in at least the university I went to, at least. But throughout that competition was a multi-stage competition, and we won the first round with our idea, and it was just a simple idea with some market analysis numbers and whatnot. We won that round, and then the second round required us to show a bit more to the business, right? And of course, us being some desperate students trying to get stuff up for our CV, we tried our best, and the next round expected a bit of traction for the business. And so what did we do? We went out to on our sort of Easter break and actually sort of piloted our idea. And it just sort of slowly, gradually increased in terms of this startup slowly forming and materializing after a while. And before we knew it, we eventually successfully raised sort of $1 million in venture capital investment for this startup for our seed round. And all it was is just me being a biomed background student trying to get into consulting with no experience. But what was cool about that is that I just realized that I loved that whole experience of trying to find an idea. And once you can see your idea really being able to help people solve any problem that they have, I think that sort of click moment is just magical. And that's sort of been my driving factor from now on. But I'm especially keen to hear your story, Hillary. What was your story being so young?
I mean, I just turned 16 like last month, but I started my business when I was like 10 years old because I took part in a pretty much baby version of the similar startup competition you were in. For that process, I decided to take part because I thought it would be interesting and it would be something I could learn from. And similarly, from that point, I decided that this was a genuinely cool idea and something that could be helpful. So by a very similar vein, I was just experimenting, meeting with people, and slowly but surely was able to make minor minus into a tangible thing that we're continuing to grow day by day. But one thing that I noticed that was quite interesting that I'd like your input on is that from both answers, from both Amir and from Kinsum, both of you mentioned different career paths, like getting offers from McKinsey or initially wanting to pursue a career in consulting. So my question is, what made you choose the startup life over going into a potentially high-paying job, and do you have any regrets from that?
Yeah, I suppose I'll go first in this one. For me, it was really about thinking what I value. Like, there are trade-offs in life, and I think you've got to know where you stand on certain trade-offs. People value money, they value spare time, they value relationships, they value remote work. Just name a few. Maybe it's the kind of interesting work you do. Maybe it's job stability, job security, that kind of thing. There are all sorts of trade-offs when you consider your careers. And for me, I think doing startup experience versus working in a summer internship at a consulting firm versus working at a law firm and also an investment bank, it was really thinking about what those institutions provided to me and what I wanted to get out, right? Some people, they want to spend 2 years at a particular institution, go do something else, and that's perfectly fine if you know it's for you. For me personally, when I looked at my values and the different sets of things I was getting, I knew that I didn't value money that much. Obviously, a certain subsistence is important, but I really valued being interested in things. And I think that if I look back in like 40 years, I want to live a life that I think is worth living. And I think that was the most important thing for me. So startups are fascinating. They're interesting. I think the work that I actually do matters. And I think it's more interesting than what I did actually in consulting and in law and also banking. So that was my personal journey. That's why I found it important. But Kisam, I know what you'd have to say about that.
Yeah, so my story is a bit different. I actually applied for pretty much like all of the big consulting firms, but I actually got rejected for all of them for my summer internship. So, and that was still sort of my direction that I wanted to head in. But the sort of key thing that made me decide to not pursue that route, even after I sort of built the CV, was thinking about the reasons why I wanted to go into sort of consulting. And it was basically my motivations were to surround myself with super smart people to hopefully one day find a direction, to be inspired in the direction that I wanted to head in life. But throughout my journey in doing my startup, the direction came clear immediately as I was doing it. Maybe not immediately, but it was more clear doing that than sort of applying to internships and then getting into like an entry-level consultant job and then doing like grunt work for like a consultant team for a while. It just felt like I could really impact the world so much more through my startup, through my idea with sufficient traction, as opposed to sort of working my way up in a large consulting firm. Obviously, that's not reflective of all consulting firms because there are some niche ones where you're a bit more hands-on. But that was sort of my mindset when I sort of decided. And I also had the privilege of being able to raise investment before I left university, so I had a bit of time to make that decision with a safety net.
Yeah, I just want to butt in here a bit, right? Because I'm from business school, a lot of us want to be bankers, consultants, and I would say that my own journey hasn't been that fixated. I mean, as a freshman, I listened to the advice from my seniors. You should go to Goldman, you should go to McKinsey. But I think along the way, I pivoted a bit. I tried to intern in a fintech startup that was very interesting, and then after I went to try venture capital, private equity. Now ending up in hedge fund. So I guess we don't be too fixated. I think for students, the best identity you have is that you're a student, right? You're allowed to fail. You're allowed to go and try different things. So 3 or 4 years in university, just go do it, right? Don't worry too much about the what ifs and what not. If there's anything that comes along, try it. You never know, you might like it. Yeah.
On the thread of investment, there are many startups or people who want to go into startups that always asked about how to get investors on board. Since I'm assuming all three of you have done so already, what are some tricks that you use to convince investors, and how long did it take for you to find someone who is willing?
Sure. I can start us off. For our situation in RiseSync, we actually, most of our funding actually came from grants initially. And then, it's basically a mixture of grant funding and also pseudo venture capital funding. And I say pseudo just because it's not through the traditional venture capital route where you pitch to investors and then if they like your idea, they sort of invest. We actually raised our million through going through and progressing through a competition, a social enterprise competition called the Hulk Prize. So it's a bit different. But what I would encourage is that there are so many of these competitions, especially in the UK where I studied, that there's simply sort of, if you have an idea and if you refine it enough, there's so many of these that you can probably win one or two to get some sort of pilot funding for your pilot. So that's how I would recommend, and that sort of pilot traction is usually a prerequisite in further rounds of funding anyways, for investors. So that's our story.
If either of you have anything to add to this?
I mean,
I think for my side, because I actually interned in VC before, but so VC is basically very interested in look at your ultimate market size. What is your total addressable market? That's very important. So I mean, at least for students in Southeast Asia, it's very important that, I mean, unless you're from Indonesia, which is a huge market, it's important to show that you have the mind to scale beyond your home country and to do a lot of research, right? Because a lot of times you might think you have a groundbreaking idea, but more often than not, this idea has probably is in the market. And if it's not in the market, do some more research to know why it's not in the market. Is it because there's no the demand you're thinking about is actually imaginative? There's actually no demand for this. And if there is, right, what are some of the challenges of facing? It's very important to do research. Do not go all in. Do a lot of market testing and validation. And you're a student, very very important. Go for support from universities. I think universities are very helpful. They have incubators, they have accelerators, equity-free grants to help you as well. I think along the way I got a lot of grants from universities and from the governments to begin with. And after that, that gives investors more confidence in what you're doing, because obviously they don't want to take the risk. So universities are usually more helpful and nurturing in that sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We raised about 30 grand in kind of like a halfway friends and family round. But it wasn't really, it was kind of an investor who then came on board on the team. In terms of what we learned, like one of the most important things is going to be traction. Like you want to be able to demonstrate that. If you're going to a VC and you don't have an MVP which has traction, that's going to make your life very, very difficult. There are exceptions, obviously, but if you're a university student, with most of you are going to be, then no one's going to give you 500K off the bat. Unless you go to like a competition, that kind of thing, as Keeson mentioned. Market validation, traction is your best friend, and they will take you very, very far. There are obviously other considerations, but if you're interested, read stuff like The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Running Lean by Ash Maurya is a fantastic way to start. Excellent book, and has like a step-by-step guide on how to begin the early stages of a startup. I think, in addition to that, making sure you work well with your co-founder, all that sort of stuff they're going to kind of be looking for. And the final thing is that, as Calvin mentioned, the incubators and accelerators, fantastic. Like often they will invest in you in the beginning. Some of them will be less competitive, some will be universities, places like YC or Bethnal Green Ventures in London. They'll do all those kind of stuff. So have a Google, have a search around. There are loads and loads of opportunities.
Yeah, going to a team is very important, right? Because I mean, none of us are good in everything. Know what you're good in, right? So if you're a computer science student, you'll be handling a technology. You need to find a complement, right? Your co-founder or team have to be someone very good in doing product or business development or sales. to have that kind of. I mean, the VCs are very big in that because a lot of times, right, the successful startups you see nowadays, the big unicorns, they pivoted many times along the way, right? Whatever they started off is nothing. Whatever you see now, and the reason why they are successful is because the team is able to stay together. They complement each other very well, and that's something that VCs are very keen to look out for, investing in talents rather than the idea itself. Yeah, execution is very important as well.
On that, Fred, as most of us know, if you've looked up startups, there's usually a stat which goes 90% of startups will fail. So my question to you is twofold. First of all, what have been your biggest failures? And second of all, how would you decide to cope with failure in the future should it happen? And are there any strategies that you would do to not necessarily avoid failure, but to work out how it can be leveraged or how it can be accepted?
I think in terms of failures, the most important thing is understanding that failures is going to be the main driving force of your entrepreneurial journey. The more failures that you have, that means the faster, the more you're learning, and the closer you are at really trying to basically get that product market fit, because you're not going to be able to identify it right from the get-go unless you're super duper lucky. And it's about really conducting defined experiments with a set hypothesis and then disproving all of your assumptions. I mean, in our case, our initial business model was about, we identified that a bunch of rice wastage was actually happening in one specific part of the rice supply chain, which is right after harvesting, you have to dry the rice before you mill it. And that drying process, farmers were using age-old traditional methods of like sun drying their rice instead of using the machines that were widely available. And so we were like, why don't we come up with a business model of just giving the farmers, renting out this one specific dryer to them? And we came up with this whole business model with this one dryer. We initially pitched this idea and to conduct our pilot in Vietnam. Like that changed. Our business model eventually changed to what it is now. The machine that we used also changed. Our pilot site also changed, and these were all learnings through testing things out, and then basically it's failing, basically getting no traction until you get that hint of traction, and then you double down, and double down, and double down, and so slowly build momentum from that. So I think it's really about a mindset shift, that in terms of expecting failures and really embracing them. I think I had a lot of difficulty with this in the beginning, because I just felt so bad every time we spent so much energy on this one idea and it just blew up in our face. But after a while, you just realize that's part of the entrepreneurial journey, and hope, and it might be worth it one day is the question for some people. For others, it's appreciating the journey itself. I find is a bit more comforting in that sense.
Okay, so to touch on an idea that we had a bit earlier, which is about getting a good team together and knowing that you alone cannot do something. I found that from my own experience, having good mentors and having a good support system to get advice has been absolutely crucial for the growth of Minor Miners. So I'd like to ask you guys, do you guys have mentors? Who do you look for support and different ideas to bounce off on?
Maybe I can go first for this. I think absolutely. I think mentoring is super important for me because the journey for us is not that easy because it's a lot about changing people's perception of how they think about the region, and a lot of us have very fixated ideas of how people think, and it's not easy. As mentioned about failures, I was just looking through my email account. There was this partner that really wanted to work with, And the first conversation we had was with them was August last year, and it was with many follow-up emails, keep pressing them, being very shameless about it, introducing ourselves, and then they only replied us after 3 months. So don't take it personally, right? Because people are busy as well. You got to have that conviction, and I think in mentoring, it's very helpful because it helps to put you in perspective. Because sometimes as entrepreneurs, you're really, really optimistic and passionate about what you're doing. You might be also blindsided by what the market is telling you. So I think my mentor, one of them is, her name's called Virginia. She's amazing. So she's Singaporean who started this initiative called Lean In. Lean In is a global one. She started the China chapter when she was working there. So she was always sharing her experiences. I think having a mentor is good because they will tell you from experience that failure is not ultimate, right? They have failed many times. And it's also very important that they give you advice to not make the same mistake as they did. So hopefully, with their advice, you'll be able to have a smoother journey to what you're trying to do. So I think that's why mentoring has been helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just echoing on the thoughts of failure and talking, just a bit about that is, I think it's very, very hard to see in the moment, but often many failures come with a seed of equal opportunity that is allowed to grow. There is often a silver lining, which becomes very hard to see. It's all about being resilient, taking time out to see that perspective. And often mentors can be the perfect people to help with that because they too themselves have gone through large amounts of failure. Similar to Hillary, our developers were not working very well for a long time. And in the end, I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to program it. I can't be bothered with this anymore. You've got to take certain radical steps at times. I think in terms of kind of team as well, like when you're working with a team, as you were hinting at, Hillary, I think culture is so key. Like not only the skills you have, and Simon Sinek, the thinker, says a lot about this. The kind of culture that you have, that you foster, that will trickle down to all of the organizations. Same with the organizations you go and work for. If you're just working a job that's not in a startup, that culture will be very pervasive. And even though it's not tangible, will impact completely in the way that you behave and the way that you interact. One thing I do want to ask Hillary is, with your experience of Minor Minus so far, how have you found mentorship / culture to be useful to you?
So for me, I've very much benefited from the startup environment in Hong Kong. Because Hong Kong is a smaller place, the community tends to be a lot smaller and very, very opening. So it's very welcoming. So when I started as a 10-year-old kid, I had a lot of people approach me saying that my idea was something that sounded cool and something that they'd be willing to talk to me about and to learn more from. So by taking them up on these offers and just going to learn more, ask them questions about what they've done themselves, ask them about what's going on and how does a business work. It's just slowly the way you get that information, the opening culture, that's what enables you to open doors and enables you to do it yourself rather than to just ambiguously look at a textbook about entrepreneurship. Because one thing that I find interesting about startup culture in recent years is just how much buzzwords you get thrown around the place. Like everyone reads the same few books. Everyone talks about design thinking. Everyone talks about Google Sprint or whatever. And often it just really takes real conversations with real people who have done it to break out of that inspirational thing without just getting into the reality of it and doing that startup.
Yeah, I completely want to echo that just because, even I myself, I talk about running lean, all of that. Yeah. I learned 10 times more from doing my startup than I did from those books. And I think the best thing if you're reading those books is don't read them in isolation. I actually absorbed running lean 10 times more when I was using it as I was doing my startup. I wasn't reading it as a textbook. I was using it to just give me food for thought as I was going and learning, and that I found the most useful. Like if you're just reading it for the intellectual curiosity, it's not going to sink in the same way. When you have to take what you're learning and directly apply it every single second, that's why I think it's massively beneficial to you. And you don't copy and paste the ideas. You develop your own theories on top of that based on how you think. So if you're reading that kind of stuff, the practical application, it's worthless without it.
Absolutely. So One thing about entrepreneurship generally is that it's become this often touted thing, like entrepreneurial thinking, and it's something that's been taught in schools in recent years. By the same thread, do you think that this is something that can be taught and actively instilled in children or, young people? Or is it something that has to be inherently lived through to be able to truly grasp?
I want to make a distinction here, right? So, I mean, there are people who can be good businessmen, right? I think entrepreneurship to me is about having a greater purpose, right? If you're just trying to be SME, trying to profit, I mean, entrepreneurship is really about having a very strong conviction of trying to change the world, and that's very important. I think that's what differentiates entrepreneurs and business people, right? That to me is very clear, and a lot of times, right, your personality is very important. So some of us are more risk averse. Some of us have different aspirations for their life. So you don't have to. I think a lot of times now, especially in the ASEAN region, it's become a buzzword. It's very cool to be an entrepreneur,
Yes.
but right, you have to be very aware, right? What it takes, right? The sacrifices. A lot of people have been looking at the success stories, those people with hellos that succeeded. But I think Jack Ma once said as well, right? Very famous Chinese entrepreneur. For everybody that succeeded, it's probably like 99 people did, right? Laying dead along the way of success. So it's actually very important to learn the lessons of those who failed, and to know for yourself, right? Don't get too sucked up into this entire hype of being entrepreneur. Really know why do you want to do it? What is the change you want to make in the world? Like, are you prepared to sacrifice? In terms of your time, in terms of your maybe potential career prospects. And if you have after thinking about you're already convicted, then go for it, right? But don't go it because you think it's cool, there's peer pressure, and you want to be famous, right? I think that wouldn't really last you very long as an entrepreneur.
Kinsip, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah. In terms of can you teach a young person or a child to be an entrepreneur? I mean, I think before that, I think you would be able to teach them the sort of traits that would make a successful entrepreneur. For example, being fine with failure from a young age, not sort of punishing them and conditioning them to be okay with experimenting and innovating and sort of having their own opinion on things. I think all of these are good traits that would make a good entrepreneur in the future. So I guess to some extent, yeah, you could say you can technically train a whole generation of entrepreneurs in that sense. But whether people want to be an entrepreneur, that's a completely different sort of situation, and it relates to what Calvin just mentioned about what their personality traits are, risk averse. It's that failure rate isn't there for nothing of 90%, and even for Rising, I'm going to be honest, like the probability of us being like a unicorn is next to nothing, right? And that applies to a bunch of other startups. Is that going to stop us from not trying to pursue that and change the world? No, but the statistics and probability say otherwise. So it takes a certain type of conditioning, a certain type of personality and mindset to really pursue this journey. And I think at the core of it is about sort of having like teaching young people to be sort of open to failures and having a constructive mindset like that, which is useful in any sort of profession, I feel.
Clear. I mean, Amir touched on the idea of giving advice to someone who's starting out pretty early in the panel, but I'd like to ask more generally. If you were to speak to yourself shortly before you started your business or your first business, what would you say to them and why?
Mine's probably easy. Find a good mentor and then have them, or find good mentors, and whatever sort of knowledge gaps that you may have, they'll help you fill. But the prerequisite to that is to really know that you want to be pursuing this route and why you're doing the things that why you're doing it, rather than the fame, which usually, or like the money, which is usually short lasting. And usually there isn't very much money when you're first starting off. You're usually first self-funded. Assuming you do have that determination, find a mentor, find lots of mentors in different sectors, and really build a network that can support you to pursue of like-minded people to support you, so that you can all help each other create a world that you want to be in.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, absolutely, completely agree. I think for me, I've learned like three main things. I've really been reflecting recently as the new year kind of came past. My three big learnings so far. First of all, don't sacrifice your health for your startup. Like for me, you see people glorifying the 100-hour week. You see a lot of that kind of stuff. I think that's healthy. I think if you're the CEO of a company, you need your mind to be sharp, and for your mind to be sharp, you need to be well rested. So know where your assets lie, and therefore you need to know that you don't sacrifice your health. The second thing is, if you are a tech startup and you are pre-MVP stage, I think have in-house programming. Don't freelance. Like, there's a reason why in the West, in ASEAN, people get local help, like local programmers, because they pay 6 times as much. You get some company you can outsource it to India for like a sixth of the cost. But the reason why people don't do that is because it's having that kind of iteration development is so fundamental. That's the biggest thing I learned, is programming myself. And the third is the character of your co-founder is so important. It will never make your startup, but it can absolutely break your startup. The character, like, I'm not talking like characteristics, like skills. I'm talking actual moral character, moral fiber, and that kind of thing. If you don't like working with that person, you're not going to have a good time. You're not going to enjoy it. And if you're doing a startup, the one thing that you get is you're enjoying what you do. So for me, that's been kind of the big things.
I just want to echo a bit on Amir's point, right? So sometimes it's okay to be good friends, but sometimes friends doesn't make very good business partners. So that's something you have to be very clear, right? So when it comes to money, when it comes to making decisions, your friendship might lead to even worse arguments, because they might assume that you know what they're thinking about. And yeah, so that's something to consider. I think one more point I want to add to this is that be more focused. I'll tell myself, be more focused when I begin. Try to really solve a small problem first before expanding it. I think I went too broad and too many things at the same time, so that actually reduced the effectiveness when I first began. So I would tell myself to be more focused in the beginning.
On the thread of co-founders, how did you find your own co-founder? And if, let's say, you start on your own, what are the traits you would look for in them, other than just so how would you work out their moral traits, and what's the process like in choosing a good co-founder?
Okay, then do you want to go first?
Sure. In terms of me, the most important trait that I look for is someone that I actually enjoy working with. They're gonna be nice, hopefully, not sort of every night that you have to do all-nighters, and sometimes it's super chill, but you have to be willing and sort of happy working with your teammates or co-founders in any sort of situation, and have the confidence in them to sort of basically be on your side through thick or thin, putting the company first, right? Putting the startup first. The next thing is always have a co-founder agreement. That's an important thing that I've heard is good. But yeah, in terms of the actual sort of business needs, what does the business that you're trying to build in terms of the skills necessary to build that? That's also another consideration. Do they have the tech skills? Do they have the sort of business development skills? These are all things that we've already mentioned, so I'm not gonna talk too much on it. So Amir, what's your take?
Yeah, I'm first of all completely agree and echo your comments. I think the best practical tip is, if you've already worked together on a project, like some sort of school project, university project, if you enter a competition together, for example, That's probably the best metric you can use, but obviously that's not always relevant. Two other points. Some people ask in the chat, what should you look for? That's slightly loaded question. It's not the right framing. What you need to ask yourself is, what do I value? What is my why? What do I want to change about the world? That needs to match. Like, ultimately, if you don't want to change the same thing, if I care about inequality and you care about working on interesting problems, be aware when you pivot, which will inevitably happen, you may fundamentally disagree with your co-founder. That's why having the same why is going to be really important. So it's questions you need to be asking yourself about who you are, which will then inform that. Second point is about skills. Know which skills you need for your startup. Know where you're lacking. Be self-aware. There's not too much to say about that one. But that's kind of, I don't know, Calvin and Hillary, what your opinions are.
I have one more. I think be very sure of the commitment level that he's willing or she's willing to put in. I mean, you should best case scenario, both of you should be working on it full time, because if one is doing full time, one doing part time, there's going to be a lot of unhappiness, when there's a lot of stress, a lot of disagreement. And I think also very importantly, get a sense, of whether how that person thinks compared to you. It's good sometimes it's good, right, to have somebody who thinks very different from you, because what is worrying is that you could be in an echo chamber when you and your co-founders think the same way, and you don't see some potential pivots that could be helpful, and that's because all of you are on the same bandwidth. So
I'm not sure if it's just me, but that kind of lagged out for the last 10 seconds.
there could be a lag. There could be a lag in between just now. So it's good to have, basically to summarize, it's good to find people who might be different in how you think compared to you. They could give you new ways of thinking as well. Do not be an echo chamber.
Clear. So one thing that I found pretty interesting throughout the panel is the distinguishing factors that has been made multiple times for entrepreneurship, specifically from just plain business, and that essentially boils down to motivation and a desire to change the world. What's that motivation for you individually? What do you seek to achieve, and what is your why, as you guys just put it?
For me, my why sort of boils down to a bit about my sort of childhood. I was born in Hong Kong, but I grew up in Sri Lanka and Vietnam. And 18 years ago, these places were a lot different to where they are now. They're that classical sort of developing regions. There's large amounts of poverty. The standards of living were a lot lower. And through my experiences, seeing the situation on the ground there compared to somewhere like home in Hong Kong, the contrast was just so stark. And growing up, I sort of knew that I wanted to do something that fundamentally helped someone in some way, especially if it involved decreasing inequality. And that was sort of like the mindset I was going in when I was applying for management consulting. How can I earn a bunch of money, be around super smart people, get their knowledge, and then try and do this. But I was fortunately able to accelerate that process a tiny bit by founding RightThink. And that's exactly the whole ethos of why we founded the company. The core mission is to reduce wastage, but that wastage basically translates into reduced livelihoods, reduced money for farmers that are typically impoverished already. And so every cent matters. And that's sort of like my driving force. And so that's sort of why the past year has been especially heartbreaking, because one of my favorite parts of this whole startup experience is actually being able to interact with our customers and our users, and sort of not being able to do that for extended periods of time. It definitely took a hit on not just my motivations, but the whole team's motivations, and also our startup performance. But hopefully, with the new pivots in a place where it's and the COVID vaccine coming along, hopefully things get better in that sense.
I think we should probably take a few questions from the floor. So one that just came up is, as an entrepreneur, failure is definitely something that all startups or businesses go through, especially at the early stages. Is there a point in time or stage where you believe that it's time to give up on a startup idea as a career and move on?
Depends on your conviction and how much money you have left in the bank. I think that's definitely like a personal one. If you believe your startup if you believe that it's possible to do what you're trying to do, and well, actually no, thinking that you can actually do something is one thing, but actually having that desire to do it is another, and that is super important, because if you have that desire, you're going to try and find a way. And unless you're resource strapped and unable to achieve that goal, that's going to be the limiting factor. But I would say this is more of a subjective, personal question.
Yeah, I think it definitely is very subjective. And two main things I like to say here. First, cash burn, as Kisa mentioned, like how much time you have left versus like how many iterations. Try and have as many iterations in the period before your cash burn, because then you can test out as many new theories, and if one of them sticks, you can survive. I think secondly, there are certain things which, if at your core you think that the startup isn't achieving your aims, like there are unfixable problems, then it might be time to call it quits. For example, co-founder disagreements. That's not gonna, you can't pivot your way out of disagreeing with someone. They are who they are. Similarly with if the startup is no longer doing your why, if you've pivoted away from something you're actually passionate about, you can't force passion. So thinking whether things are functions of pivots or whether something is like fundamentally not going to change in the long run is the second important consideration that I'd say that.
Yeah, from my side, it's important to be very conscious when you set some KPIs and goals, the short run, medium run, long run, to really keep accountable to yourself and to your team whether you're achieving it. If it's not why, there are going to be reasons, right? Don't just keep going at it. Take some time, reflect, and see how's the progress so far.
Another question from the panel would be, how different is the entrepreneurial environment in the West and the East? How welcome are they, and how competitive are they? If I can just add something on this, I am pretty new to England, so I've been here for about 2 weeks. But in Hong Kong, I found that the startup environment is significantly more welcoming than one would assume. So everyone there is very willing to help, and the competitive aspect honestly isn't that much of a problem, because entrepreneurship is generally such a broad spectrum. You're not likely to have many people doing exactly the same thing you're doing. Therefore, competition, you won't have the same type of, like, in a literal competition. It's more of a, how can I help you, and what's the overlap that can be worked on? So that's my experience with Hong Kong in the East. And I'd just like to hear the rest of the panel's opinions on this.
I think let me share a more Asian view, right? So a small story. I think most of you should know Alibaba. So when Alibaba started Taobao, it was so secretive that even their own team members didn't know. So it was so funny. So Alibaba was telling a story where basically one of the teammates told Jack, there could be a new competitor in the market, and then we've been noticing them, and they didn't realize it was their own people. It was so stealth. It was so stealth that even their own members didn't know. So I think they could give you a flavor of how competitive and how secretive it is. I think my task in China has my own sensing is that it's not as nurturing as the West or in Singapore. Because for one big reason, the competition there is super stiff. It's quite hard to find really truly innovative ideas that's not done yet in the market. More likely than not, there are people doing it, and it's just a matter of where that person is now. It could be in Guangzhou, it could be in Beijing or Shanghai, and it's quite hard to really pivot to make it very innovative. But back in Singapore, I would say that it's very nurturing. The environment from government to the universities to the people itself are very helpful. They are very keen to support each other, through drinks, through different brainstorming session with each other. So I think that has been very helpful. I felt that the environment in Singapore would be more similar to what you guys experience in the West, yeah, compared to China.
In my experience, there seems to be a difference, not just between the East and the West, but even between the more developed countries and the developing countries. For example, comparing Hong Kong to ASEAN, there's already a stark difference in my eyes. A key sort of example would be during our time in Myanmar when we were trying to sort of get a scope of the landscape. It was so much easier to get connections and get help and when we were still in our sort of ideation phase back in the UK. But when we entered Myanmar, the first thing that we learned is that networking, you have to network, and that connections are super key there. Especially if you need sort of high level approval for a certain project. This was in Myanmar, and I would probably imagine the same case being in Vietnam, probably Malaysia. But as sort of a country sort of develops, I would say it gets easier. You start being able to find people on LinkedIn that you can cold message. But in Myanmar, it's not as easy in terms of the sort of accessibility of people, which was a crucial factor in our situation.
I would say there's more information asymmetry, right? In developing countries, you got to know people, and if you're not aware, because information online isn't very updated, so getting to know people is very important in developing countries.
On a slightly different note, another question from the floor. As a startup with regards to the financial aspect, what are your thoughts on the growth first, monetize later philosophy, and which should a startup prioritize at different stages? So I think it's very much dependent on what individual startup you're doing. So like for minor miners, it's very much based on having a large base of users first in order to do what we want to do, in order to monetize and to be able to achieve our wider mission at hand. Which is why for me especially, I definitely subscribe to grow first, monetize later, because a lot of it's incumbent upon having something to begin with. But I'm sure based on what you try to achieve and based on what's realistic and what's going to keep your business sustainable, I think it's very much a fluid concept and very much dependent on what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, from what I said, I completely agree with Hillary. I think it kind of depends. And for me, generally, I say, personally, my opinion is I disagree unless there is an exception. So those exceptions tend to be when you need large user bases in order for the product itself to function. So if you're doing a marketplace, for example, or sometimes health tech can be very, very different, or anything that has large scale engineering, that will be very different in the startup space. Most of the time, though, be aware of what your riskiest assumption is. If you're doing a social media platform, for example, the fact that you can monetize that is not a risky assumption. It's been tested and tried many, many times. If you had adverts, you can monetize it. So the idea of monetizing later is not too much of an odd thing to do. Whereas in other startups, if the risky bit is the monetizing bit, you want to be thinking carefully about that. Stuff like Monzo, like a lot of the online banks, Monzo, your Revolut, have been finding that deeply problematic because everyone starts getting used to a free product and now they don't want to pay anything for it.
I think just a small comment. End of the day, right? If your business doesn't make money, which means your business is but your idea is bad, lah. So if it really brings value, your consumers should be willing to pay for it, right? If it's just a matter of time, and it could just be your products and development. But for venture capital, if they do not see the upside, the potential of you earning back whatever they're giving you, you're gonna be in big trouble. Yeah, they won't just keep giving you money.
So there's only about 5 minutes. There's 5 minutes left. So just one final question, then I'll see if anyone has any final comments. So there's a question about, as entrepreneurs, there are times when startups go into plateau. How do you cope with this when things are getting stagnant? For Minor Miners, we've had this a couple of times. Like when we first launched, there was a point where we didn't have much traction and didn't have much users. And I think at this point, it's very much an opportunity to question what you're doing, what's up with the approach, what's the way you're marketing it, and what's not going well. This tends to be a good turning point in which you can determine it's pretty much a crossroads for your startup. Either it's going to improve and you just need to experiment, or it's the point at which you can go, either I pivot entirely, or maybe this isn't the right product. So it's very much a questioning period in which you have to ascertain what's right for the business and what's right for you.
I don't have much to say about that. You completely sort of echo my thoughts, Hillary. And in fact, that's the exact sort of situation where we are as a sort of startup transitioning out of Myanmar into another part of ASEAN, really sort of trying to dig down and sort of do the proper research, and then speaking with potential customers and basically anyone we can get our hands on that's related to what we're trying to do in terms of transition our technology over to another country. So yeah, it's really sort of reflecting on the situation, and also, but sort of making a decisive decision quickly as well, because chances are you're probably not going to make all of the right decisions, even if you spend a bunch of time on it. So speed is definitely a factor, but you have to be smart about it and sort of weigh the balance. But you can only know that through experience and through advice from other people.
I think that today I've certainly learned a lot from this panel, especially regarding about co-founders and general approaches to startups as a concept and as a distinguishing factor between what we want to do in the world to make a difference. And I would like to thank the panel for this very interesting discussion. And if there's any final comments you guys would like to make, feel free.
I don't think too much. I just want to pick up actually what Kisam just said about decision making. There is a really interesting thing where there's going to be a trade-off between decisions you make and the amount of time spent gaining additional information. You could spend an hour researching, and that has a trade-off, has an opportunity cost, or you can make the decision there and then, but you won't do as well. And there's this balance to strike, kind of Pareto balance, where 80-20, where there is diminishing marginal return to spending more time gathering information. And knowing where that balance lies for you in terms of decision making can vastly, vastly help you. Some people spend way too long, they get bogged down, they're perfectionists. Other people clearly don't think about things enough. So knowing where you lie on that 80-20, and whether you're applying to university, whether you're applying to certain jobs, you're researching things, how much time should you spend preparing for an interview? Knowing where that lies for you, where that optimum 80-20 is, so you can do a decent amount of work and still get 80% of the way there, I think is a really big key in general decision making and how you run things.
Clear. So one thing I've learned from this panel is the idea that we must be very decisive and understand where we stand on the spectrum. I think that there have been a lot of very practical takeaways from today's panel. And if there are any questions, I'm sure we can leave emails or something so you can reach out to us. Otherwise, thank you so much for the discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We would like to thank Ms. Hillary Yip and our three distinguished panelists, Mr. Amir Hamza, Mr. Calvin Wee, and Mr. Kisam Chan for joining us here today. We would like to thank you all for your cooperation and patience thus far. We will now proceed for a break, and we will see you back here again in 10 minutes at 2:50 p.m. UK time, sharp, for an engaging Bright Network webinar on answering application and interview questions. Welcome back to the second segment of today's Warwick ASEAN conference. Having heard from our inspiring youth panelists earlier, we will now be moving on to an exciting webinar. We're delighted to have a representative from Bright Network, a career-oriented network aimed at helping the world's best companies find talent and giving university students and graduates access to the best possible career opportunities and advice. We would like to invite Ms. Shelley Ogilvie to the spotlight for this informative session on answering application and interview questions.
Hello, hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you so much for that fantastic introduction. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Just give me one moment to select the right one and make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Perfect, okay. There we go. I think we should be sharing. Yep, I think that's coming up as it should be. Yeah, so thanks so much everyone for joining. Thank you for the time as well and for inviting me along to this session. Really looking forward to talking to you guys today all around how to impress leading employers in your applications and giving you some of our top tips to help you stand out in any upcoming applications, interviews, but any interactions with employers really. So before I get started and give you a bit of background on Bright Network and myself, I want to just remind you guys to be social. So I know that I'm sure you guys have kind of are doing really engaged with this event and writing about it on social media, but any thoughts and key takeaways from my session, please do kind of feel free to kind of tag and connect with me on LinkedIn or tag Bright Network and connect with us and share your thoughts and takeaways from this session, because we're always really keen to hear how you found it. So my name's Shelley. I'm the campus manager at Bright Network. So that basically means I look after all of our fantastic members in accessing the best opportunities, insights and advice for their career to help them help you guys develop throughout your time during university and land that dream graduate role. Now that is our mission at Bright Network. Our whole purpose and mission is to really support you guys in building successful careers, and really our diversity focus encompasses our drive and aim to level the playing field. So no matter what background you come from, no matter what your experiences have been, you can access great experiences throughout your time at university that will set you up for your future career. Now within that we do a range of different things, and I'm sure lots of you are probably members already. It's completely free to become a member, and once you sign up you get access to lots of events where you'll be able to connect and meet with employers and kind of build your connections, as well as skills networking sessions and workshops, and a lot of online support on our platform through our academy and through other initiatives like Internship Experience UK, which is our virtual internships experience program, which returns this summer. So you'll be, if you sign up as a member, you'll hear find out about all about these fantastic initiatives as you kind of go on your journey with us. So now, without further ado, I know I've only got an hour and I've tried to leave some time for some Q&A as well. But first and foremost, before we get into kind of how to stand out to employers in applications and interviews, I think what's really key for us to first establish is, what do employers actually want? Because if we're talking about how you stand out to employers in interviews and applications, you need to know what they want. So every year, Bright Network does a bit of a survey out to our network where we talk to both sides of the graduate market, so both you guys as students and our employer partners. And we ask you guys, what do graduate employers want? So from the student side, it's what do you think graduate employers are really looking for in their candidates? And then from the employer side, it's what do you actually want? And as you can see on the student side, the main things that students tell us that they feel as though employers are really looking for is things like a 2-1 or above existing industry experience. Now, while these things are important, if you take a look at the second column there, which is the responses from employers, you can see that the top 5 things are actually, sorry, no, a 2-1 or above and existing industry experience is far lower down than you'd initially think. So the top 5 things that employers are really looking for is things like communication skills, passion for the business, problem-solving skills, resilience, and commercial awareness. These are the key elements and values that employers are looking for because it signifies to them a great potential employee. Sure, A 2-1 or above is great, and so is industry experience, but you could have industry experience and not have the passion and drive and problem solving skills that you need to be successful in the role. And similarly, you could have a first in your degree but not have any kind of form of resilience or commercial awareness around the company that's really going to help you in that day-to-day role. So that's why these things are the top 5 things that employers are looking for. And hopefully within this session, I'll be able to kind of pinpoint and spotlight to you the different ways you can highlight these attributes to employers throughout the application and interview process. So first up, getting prepared. It's all about, I'm going to make this point throughout the whole presentation, but the better prepared you are, the better that you will, the more confident you will be, and the better you will do, because you'll be prepared for the questions. You'll know that you know what you're talking about, and you'll come across much more genuine and convincing to an employer that you are the right candidate for the role. So in terms of getting prepared, research is absolutely critical. Now, there's so many places that you can build your research from, so don't limit yourself. Don't just think about looking at the company website. Of course, definitely do look at the company website. Don't ignore that, because they have a lot of interesting information on there, but go beyond that and dig a little deeper. Think about all the different places you can look on the internet. The internet is vast. Think about all the different places you can look at to access more information about companies. So I've put a few different bullet points there. Their LinkedIn, their other social media, Bright Network on their employer page on Bright Network. We have a range of different employers who have kind of videos and content about day in the life of working their company and things, and lots of information that you might not be able to find other places. So do check that out. But also we have success stories from other members who have secured roles with those companies, and you can filter by the sector or by the firm that you're looking to have an interview or an application for, and find out a little bit more about them ahead of your interview, as well as the different things that might crop up in your application process. Make sure to research both the firm and the role, so don't neglect either one. Understanding more about the company and its values, their competitors, really helps you to build an in-depth picture of where you could be working, but also the role. So don't negate to research more into the role. You can find out exactly what you'll be doing day to day, what a typical day in the life of someone, a trainee solicitor is, or a marketing executive. You can find out all this information online. So utilize that and really use it, not just to help you prepare for the application, but to understand and streamline whether you're applying to the right companies and whether you're applying to the right opportunities for you. Because what you don't want to do is spend so much time applying to these firms and companies that you ultimately don't want to work for, and only find that out when you get all the way to the interview process, after you've done all that prep and all that work, only to find out that it's not that right for you. So do all that work and preparation to really understand what you're looking for yourself, understand the company, understand the role, and make better applications. One key thing to remember is that meeting the company beforehand is ideal. So any opportunities, whether that's through online, obviously because we can't go out and about right now, but if you can get a moment where you can already experience with that company, where you've met a employee from there or connected with the company through one of their insight events or something like that, really helps you to then understand, again, like I made the point earlier, understand whether it's the right company for you, but then you have something also to draw on when it comes to answering questions, which we'll come into shortly, like career motivation or firm motivation. So why do you want to work for this company? You could say things like, I've met you before, I found out this about you, and it really just helps you to build a deeper connection with that company before applying. Second part of getting prepared, beyond the research, is getting prepared for the process as well, because you might have all the knowledge, you might have all the research, but if you don't know what to expect, little things, particularly in a virtual interview process, can really throw you off. Or maybe it's how you convey yourself in kind of delivering that information and the research that you've done that could really kind of negatively affect, I guess, the outcome of your interview. So I'm going to talk through some tips to really help you put your best foot forward in that respect. So firstly, the platforms. Make sure you know your platform. So make sure that you understand the Zoom, like whether it's on Zoom, whether it's on Teams, whether it's Meet, Skype, know the platform and understand how it works. You can simply watch how-to videos to really understand all the functionality. And sometimes what I personally like to do is just make sure I know how to use the platform quite innovatively. So if there's something I want to do, so for example, to give you a bit of to be completely transparent, like I have right now my screen sharing on my second screen, so you guys can see the main presentation, but then right in front of me, I have my presenter view, so I can see my notes and make sure that I'm covering everything that I need to be covering. That's just something I've learned through Zoom, to make sure that I can utilize that effectively, and I'm not kind of having to look at notes that I've written and look up and look down. I can maintain eye contact with my laptop and my camera, and still keep an eye on my notes as well. So that's just something that you might want to kind of understand, how you can share screens and kind of control what they see on your screen and things like that. Obviously, the main settings to always check is mute and camera. So to know when you're on mute and to know when you're on camera is always really key. And make sure to connect a little bit early to make sure that you don't need to do any kind of last minute things like update your platform. I can't tell you the amount of times I've gone to a meeting and then realize that my Zoom needs updating and I'm gonna have to sit there and wait for an hour for it to update. Things like that can really be avoided if you check your platform, check your tech the day before, and then check it on the day of as well. So to avoid all those kind of unnecessary last minute frustrations. Finally, webcam, eye contact with your webcam is important. Now, this is something that I'm always trying to develop, and I think you have to really remind yourself to do this many, many times, because when you're talking to people on a kind of virtual platform, you do tend to look at their picture or see kind of where you can see them on your screen. But sometimes it might be at the bottom of your screen, it might be to the left, to the right. But the best way to really convey eye contact and convey that confidence and to connect with people who are watching you through the screen is by looking at your webcam, and that really creates a nice direct line of eye contact and gives that impression that you're looking them in the eyes, which is always great for interviews. So just keep that one in mind. And if you notice yourself drifting away or looking up into the sky, just kind of redirect your focus back to that webcam. Second point is all around kind of professionalism. So first and foremost, dress code. So for virtual interviews, I always recommend, for any interview, in person or offline, dress how you for virtual interviews, dress how you would dress for an in-person interview. It's no different, and it really helps you to get in the mindset of an interview. If you're chilling in your like pajamas or whatever, you're kind of already in a relaxed mindset, because your brain is automatically thinking, right, pajama bottoms are on, I'm in relaxed mode. But then the top half of you is looking smart, so it's kind of in a split mindset. If you dress head to toe in your interview gear, you'll feel ready for the your mind will be in that mindset from the get-go, and you'll feel more ready for the interview. Also, in terms of what to actually wear in general, I always recommend having in your research, making that part of your research. So looking at other people as part of the company, looking on their company website. What do you see the team wearing? What do you see them wearing on a day-to-day basis? How do they look when they go speak to clients? Like, take note of this. When they're on YouTube, do they have any videos about their company? What does everyone seem to be kind of, what's the general dress code that you can see? And match that. I think you want to show them that you already fit into their culture, fit into their dress code, that you really get the company. So that's my key points on that. Things like the room, the internet connection, make sure there's nothing too crazy in the background to distract them, because you want them to be focused on you and what you're saying. Make sure that you, like similar with the tech checking, make sure your internet connection is working. And if you are having some difficulty with internet connection, I know sometimes you can check it as many times as you want, but sometimes it just kind of starts to fail a little bit. Everyone's on limited bandwidth at the moment, with everyone being at home and working remotely. I personally, I've had great kind of internet over the past, kind of throughout lockdown, thankfully. But I know that on my street, I think because lots of people at home and using the Virgin Media internet connection, it can really stress out the Virgin connection on our street. So sometimes it's just a simple fix to that is just mentioning that at the start of your interview, that really apologies, but I'm having some internet problems this morning. Hopefully it's all sorted, but do let me know if I'm cutting out at any points, if you need me to repeat anything. Something so simple like that. Companies are going to be really understanding that these issues might arise in a virtual setting, and they're prepared for that because they're experiencing it themselves. Just be cool, calm, collected, and manage those expectations effectively. My next point is all around kind of closing any browsers, apps, programs. Not only does that help with the internet connection to make sure that your internet's not fighting between all the Netflix apps you've got open and things, but it also means that you're not then going to be distracted by any pop-ups coming up. So for example, if your phone's connected to your laptop and it starts ringing unexpectedly, it doesn't do it with my work laptop, but with my personal laptop, it then, if I don't answer my phone might be on silent, but then it will come through on my laptop loud and start ringing. So just kind of checking that everything's disconnected and everything's just focused on your interview, and also that there are kind of like email sounds popping up in the background that can be really distracting and might distract you from your point and just kind of pull your attention away from giving a great answer to an interview question. A couple other things: avoid typing. So what the feedback that we've been getting from some of our employer partners is that when you're typing, even though it might be that you're just innocently taking notes, it can sometimes look as though you are, I suppose, almost kind of Googling answers or trying to kind of have an advantage in terms of searching things up. So just avoid touching the keyboard. If you do need to take notes, just handwrite them. Just say, I'm just going to take a couple notes on some of the key things you said, and let them know that you'll be doing that, but do it written so they know that you're not kind of trying to sneakily Google anything. For better audio, use headphones. Like myself, I'm using headphones today because I'm actually in our offices today, and because, as I mentioned, my internet at home is quite terrible, so I wanted to make sure that everything came across quite clearly for you guys. But I wanted to, I put my headphones in because I'm in a big room, it's quite echoey, and I want to make sure that you guys can hear me quite clearly. It also means if you are at home in a busy house, if you have a flat share, if you have pets and younger brothers and sisters or children, it might be that there's a lot of chaos going on outside of the room that you're doing your interview in, or your street is very busy. So what headphones really helps you to do is cancel out some of that background noise. I know that when I have my headphones in, I know sometimes my nephew and niece come bounding in the house, but even though I can hear them, it doesn't normally come through on through their headphones. So at least if you can hear them in the background, someone listening in to your audio can't hear them, which is always kind of helpful. Is there a shark on the screen? So I know people are constantly having kind of Zoom pub quizzes and meetups with their friends and playing around with the Zoom functions, like having different backgrounds and stuff to play around with. My main point for this is just making sure that you don't like put something on the back of your screen, close a meeting that you're having with your friends the night before, then come onto Zoom the next day or any platform the next day for your interview, forgetting that that's on there, and then starting an interview with some crazy, ridiculous filter on your screen. It sounds ridiculous, but it's happened, and that's why this point is here, because it's happened to a couple of my colleagues. But this brings back the point of connecting early. So just make sure that you are checking your platform before you join, making sure everything is set up and the camera and settings are all as they should be. Finally, grab a glass of water. Even if you're not thirsty, it's always good to just have it there just for composure. You forget, even now, I haven't got a glass of water, but I've got a cup of coffee next to me, because just before this meeting, I thought, let me just go get a drink, because if there's any point that I get really kind of thirsty or my mouth goes dry, when you get nervous, it happens. Or if there's a difficult question that you want to answer, that you're not sure how to answer, it really does give you a bit of a buffer. So instead of having to scramble and show that you're scrambling and just have that awkward silence, you can take that moment to just take some water, drink it, and as you're doing that, you can think a little bit, and it gives you a bit of time, because no one's going to expect you to speak and drink water at the same time. So that's just a little tip from me. So now that we've gone through kind of preparation, both from a research standpoint and from a platforms and professionalism standpoint, now let's get into kind of application and interview questions. So the key things to consider when you're trying to prepare for these questions is these three core question types. So you'll either be answered career motivation asked career motivation questions, firm motivation questions, or skills and competencies questions. So basically, in a nutshell, career motivation questions, why this career, as the title suggests, helps them to assess whether you have really thought about why you want to pursue a career in the field that you're trying to pursue. And understand your motivations behind wanting to get into that career. So basically assessing your passion for the business and how you communicate that. So again, your communication skills, which is, as I mentioned, are one of those both of those top two things that employers are always looking for from their students, candidates. firm motivations is why this company. So that essentially means, why have you picked out of all of our competitors, out of everyone else you could have applied to, why did you pick us? Why are you really keen to work for us? Again, it's just a passion for the business and your ability to communicate the reasoning behind, I guess, your analysis that brought you to deciding to apply for this company. And then finally, why are you the perfect candidate? Assesses like your skills and competencies. So what skills do you have? What experiences can you bring to the table, or transferable skills that really help them to understand that will support you in being successful in this role? What do you have that will help you to really step up and tackle this role in the best effective way? Now, when it comes to answering those questions, there's a few there's a few key things to consider. So in terms of career motivation, so why this career? Think about things like, this should all come out from your research, and it should really be tied to what you genuinely believe. So really take time to think, why do I want to follow this career? Is it that I've gone to university and studied a degree within that kind of similar subject and really enjoyed the work that we've been doing, enjoyed the modules? What modules have I really found affinity to? What have I been good at? Is this where my strengths lie? Why am I really interested in following this career? What is the draw for me? What is the benefit? It could be things like intellectual fulfillment. So it's maybe you want to go into research because you really like the idea of breaking down and diving deep into a topic and understanding why, understanding causality and things like that. Does that make you really kind of passionate? Is it because of the kind of nature of the work? So I know that some people really like work that is quite autonomous. So for example, if you were going to be a software engineer or something, or a developer, or working in tech, even though every job you have to work in a team in some aspect, sometimes those kind of roles can be quite autonomous. Like you have things that you work through and develop in your own time, and you can really just get your head down into a project and work that way. Or alternatively, maybe you are a super people person, and the nature of the work means that you get to go out and make lots of client relationships and build and get to talk to people, be out and about in face-to-face settings, or like virtual face-to-face settings. What is it that really excites you about a career in that field and that sector? Always write your answers back to yourself. So why does the nature of the work appeal to you? And to you specifically. So use moments from your experience or career. So explain what it is. So maybe it's intellectual fulfillment, but then take them back through the story. How did you work out that was why that's really important to you? Was it that in your academic career that you've had opportunities to kind of work on similar projects and it's really excited you, and explain why that really excited you? Is it because you've done an internship and that really sparked your interest in a particular area? Did you have a mentor that kind of gave you an insight into that sector and really made you excited about it? I think what's really key here is not only to tell them the story, but tell them where you first developed interest, and then how you built on that interest. So first what sparked it, and then how you went about exploring that to develop that interest and work out, okay, so this seems interesting. How did you get from thinking this seems interesting and I know I want to follow a career in this? Fill that gap in for them. I'm just going to check quickly that you guys can still hear me all good and everything's all coming through clear. Any questions at all for this session, please do pop them in the chat. The more questions I can see in the chat, then I can obviously make sure I leave enough time at the end, because I could talk about this topic for ages. So I'll make sure to leave enough time at the end for those questions. So do kind of keep me updated with anything that you want me to kind of go back and talk about. So, so firm motivation, very similarly to career motivation, again, tell them the story. You might want to talk about things. So remember, firm motivation is all about why you want to work for that company specifically. So it's not just an opportunity to massage their ego, but also an opportunity for you to highlight how much work you've done in terms of research to really identify why this company is right for you. So if you've done your research well, this question should be a piece of cake, because you should have looked at all of their competitors. And if you're interested in a career in that sector, really you should be assessing all the competitors, because they could be other options for you to apply to. And then making those through your research, you'll find out, okay, this competitor actually has a slightly different graduate scheme. I'm not sure if I want to apply to them because of X, Y, Z. Or this company actually, I'm really keen to, because for example, on the previous slide I mentioned, you might be really interested in the nature of work or the working environment, going out and about, working with people, connecting with clients and things like that. Maybe perhaps looking at the two different firms within a sector, you notice that one allows you to do that more and encourages that more than another, and that's why you wanted to go for this firm. Think about things like that. Other things to consider: the people and culture. Does the culture and the firm's values align more closely with yours, better than one of their competitors, and vice versa? Are there opportunities for growth better? Is there opportunities to kind of be more hands-on in that role than maybe the other competitors? Really think about what has made you choose that company and tell them that story. Again, a really good one this is another reason why it's really important to be able to meet or connect with the firm beforehand, even if it's just being able to connect with someone on LinkedIn who has worked for the company or been through the graduate scheme, and to ask them a few questions about it and what really excited them around it. That's a great example to bring up, to say, I actually connected with one of your an alumni from my university who went through your graduate program, and the insight she gave me about X, Y, and Z, be specific, really allowed me to see that this is something that really aligns to my values, something that I would find really interesting because of X, Y, Z, and highlight why that's important to you. All your examples should be personal to you. They should never be generic. They shouldn't just be based on what's on their website, that they say, oh, we have a really inclusive culture. Go further than that. Dig deeper and understand why what they're saying and who they are really resonates with who you are, and pulls you in and makes you want to work for them. I guess in a nutshell, what you're really trying to explain to them is why you want to invest the next, I suppose, 2 or 3 years of your life, if you're going into a graduate scheme or if it's an entry-level role. Why do you want to invest 2 to 3 years of your life in this company? Think about it that way. And once you know that answer, you'll be able to give a really great response. Other top tips. So first and foremost, keep your applications responses brief, and your CV quite brief as well. So usually most application forms are online. You might not need to upload your CV, but if you do need to upload your CV, make sure it's really, you tweak it before you do, and make sure it's really tailored to the job description and the firm and the sector. Also, if you're using parts of your CV to obviously influence your application responses, just make sure it's brief to the point. Don't ramble on. Just have, when I'm saying tell a story, have a strong beginning, middle, and end, and then you should be really well structured. Another key point is to learn the lingo. So this comes back to kind of what I mentioned around dress code and dressing like the company. You can also sound like the company. So if there's key terminology or wording that they use on their website or part of their branding or social media that you think actually that's quite unique to that company, maybe you should just try to kind of utilize that in your application process. So if there's a particular way that they describe their clients, for example, maybe they don't call their clients clients, maybe they call them partners. Don't say in your application that you're really keen to work with the sorts of clients they have. Like, say you're really keen to work with your partners and develop relationships, and I'm interested in face-to-face kind of communications and things like that. So just utilize the lingo that's there to help you come across not only that you look the part, but sound the part as well. Follow up with applications regularly and politely. So it's absolutely fine to check in every kind of couple of weeks or maybe every month on applications. Obviously, do remember that with some of these larger graduate schemes and these bigger companies, they have thousands upon thousands of applications. And yes, they are working through getting back to people. Make sure you understand the process. So will you hear back if it's a yes or a no? Like, are you going to hear back either way, or is it that you only hear back with a yes? And understand that process. If it's that you'll hear back either way, like, you can always check in just to show you're keen, to say, just wanted to follow up with this application, really excited to kind of explore this further. But what you don't want to do is kind of chase them or say, what's happening with my application? Or come across very pushy or impolite, because that's not going to bode well for your app for you. Sometimes it's that they'll say that they'll get back to you by X date, and then that date goes. If they said they're going to back to you, just politely nudge them and say, I'm just checking in. I was hoping to hear back from this from this date. But if not, that's absolutely fine. Please do let me know once you have an update, something like that, just to show them that you're really keen, but you understand that they're busy and that it's just a slight delay, and that you're still very much keen to be part of the program. So just be mindful of how you chase up with them. I think after after a few weeks, maybe 2 weeks, 2 months, or whatever it is, sometimes I think there's a limit in terms of how many times you should follow up with an application. Like, don't just keep bombarding messages if you've heard nothing back, because if it's a successful one, they will get in touch with you, of course. And if it's feedback you're looking for, you can always, I think the maximum, ask twice. So if it's like you've been unsuccessful and you've asked for feedback and then no response, then maybe just follow up and say, did you see my above email? If they don't reply after that, you just have to kind of cut your losses and just kind of accept that maybe they're super busy. But don't just keep trying to bombard someone if you're not hearing a response back. Finally, don't overuse I. That's just kind of a quick tip, just to kind of get you thinking about how you're conveying yourself in those application questions. Keep saying I doesn't really read well, and be a bit more sophisticated in terms of how you're articulating those application responses. So just a few final thoughts before I go into Q&A, because I believe this will take me a few minutes, but I believe then we'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A. But firstly, resilience. So one of the key things, I think I mentioned this at the start as well, that employers are really looking for is resilience. And I think this really does come from a lot of those negative experiences that you might have had in terms of applications and interviews. So even though you might be feeling, so basically we did a careers and wellbeing week a couple of weeks ago, something that I ran with the team, because we noticed that obviously this is a really challenging time, and I wanted to make sure that our members were really getting the support in terms of managing their wellbeing as well as working towards their career. And one of the key things that came out a lot from speaking to members during that week was that there's just a real lack of motivation and just a real, I guess, a feeling of a downtrodden feeling across members who have been doing applications and applying and not feeling as though they're getting anywhere, or getting a lot of rejection. And while absolutely rejection, it sucks, it's not the best, but when you realize that it's part of the experience and it's inevitable in some sense, you really can accept it and see it for the opportunities that it is. Just given, for example, my own experience, I can't even tell you the amount of applications I sent in my final year of university, and in previous years to get internships and things like that. But far more percentage in terms of the ones I actually got even a message back from or an interview for. Probably somewhere close to 10% of all the applications I sent out, did I get responses. And I don't think that was a reflection solely on myself, and that I wasn't great for the role or anything like that. I think it's just a reflection on, it's just how things go. There's so many people trying to go for these applications, and yeah, absolutely, sometimes you might be actually one of the better people for that role, but there's not space for absolutely everyone. So it might be that for a particular role you might have been great for the role, but that company has missed you, unfortunately. Or it just might be that there was value differences, so perhaps you being part of that company might not have been the best outcome in the long term. Maybe that you had different values and it just wouldn't have worked out in the long term. But what's really key to remember from these moments is that every single rejection you get is an opportunity to progress and to get feedback. So what I mean by that is that every time I went to an interview, whether it was successful or not, especially when you first start applying and first start going for interviews or submitting applications and getting feedback, every single one helps you get more into the process of applications. Understand, you learn a little bit more about what each employer is looking for, the differences, the similarities, what really resonates well. When you answer certain questions, you'll see how those were received quite nicely by employers, or which ones kind of fell on deaf ears and things. And you start to build a better understanding of how you come across in interviews, and also just get more confident. You'll notice that you'll be faster with submitting applications. The first couple will take you hours, but once you get that right and have those core, you understand what you're saying, and a great way of kind of conveying those firm motivation, career motivation, skills and competencies, you really stand out and can start to be a lot quicker with how you're filling out those applications. Exactly the same with interviews. Your first couple of interviews might feel a bit rocky because it's the first time you've done it, you're a bit rusty. But as soon as you get into it and do maybe your fourth, fifth, sixth, you'll be absolutely flying through the interviews. You'll be enjoying them. You'll be taking them as an opportunity to kind of assess the company as well, which is what an interview is ultimately for. It's not just about the company assessing you and grilling you, but it's also about working out whether that company is right for you. So it feels like you're on a much more even playing field when you think about it that way. And you just start to develop more confidence with it overall. So when you get these setbacks, remember that this is building resilience and helping you to become better at going through the application process, and inevitably it's literally building you up for that person who's going to say yes. So by the time you do get your yes, it'll be because you've had so many interviews and so many applications and experiences where you've been able to develop and hone your delivery skills, that when you get in front of the person that says yes, they'll be saying yes because you're pruned and primed and just delivering to perfection. Finally, another point linked to what I just said is always ask for feedback. So it's really difficult to see those opportunities as opportunities, those rejections and setbacks as opportunities without having feedback to action. So if you don't know what you did right or wrong, it is just confusing and it can be just quite disheartening. But if you know, okay, this is where I went wrong, or this is where I can improve next time, you then have actionable next steps to then almost experiment with and put into practice for the next interview. So you can say, okay, on that one, I had feedback that I didn't explain my questions fully, or didn't explain my answers fully, or was a bit generic. So I'm going to try out to address that feedback issue with my next application, and then looking at that feedback, see, okay, did I meet, did I progress in that area, or did I fall short in that area again? Do I still need to work on it? And that really helps you to hone your skills. What I kind of mentioned previously as well, think about the unique questions that you want to know as well. So remember that this is at both kind of events and interviews. If you're meeting employers beforehand, whether it's networking events online and things and developing your connections with employers, or at interview stage, it's a two-way street. Not only are they obviously trying to find out if you're the right person for the job, but they're also trying to find out whether you're also trying to find out whether it's the right company for you. So you've obviously done your research. You know the key things that have excited you, but there might be a couple areas that you're unsure if they fit your bill in terms of the things that you value. So maybe a really inclusive, fun, diverse culture is what you're looking for. And perhaps what you've researched hasn't shown you quite enough in that department. So in your questions, make sure you're understanding, or they're helping you to get an indication whether that is the case, whether they meet the criteria that you have as well. Obviously, you don't want it to come across as if you're grilling them in any way, but this is your chance to understand whether this is where, if you get an offer, if this is somewhere that you can see spending 2 to 3 years of your life or longer. And finally, great preparation breeds confidence and strong composure. So if you prepare well, if you have done your research thoroughly, if you've checked your tech and prepared in terms of how you'll deliver your interview and getting ready for the actual interview itself and getting set up professionally, you will feel so much more confident than if you feel as though, oh, I've missed some, I haven't done my research in depth enough, and they ask you a question about something that you really should know the answer to, and that just knocks your confidence because you just didn't research that area. If you've done thorough research, you will feel ready for that, and that comes across in the way that your demeanor is, the way that you answer the questions, and allows you to put your best foot forward and maintain a strong composure. Usually when you go into interviews, you're nervous or unsure because you don't know what they're going to say, you don't know what questions you might be asked, and you just generally feel quite not sure if you're prepared enough. But if you've done that in-depth research, you'll be able to, even if it's on a question that maybe is a little bit more abstract or you couldn't prepare for, you can utilize your research and your prep to be able to answer that question effectively. Because you know the skills they're looking for, you know the type of candidate they're looking for, and you know what they really need to see from you, so you can exemplify that. So that's really everything for me in terms of application interviews. Obviously, I can go on and on about kind of breaking down into applications, breaking down interviews, but I think those are the core things you really need to know and understand and think about when preparing for them in order to really stand out and wow employers. but yeah, so that's everything from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And oh, I can see some questions coming through for me on the chat. So I'm just going to have a quick look through these. So firstly, from someone called Ying, there are many firms out there and many of them share similar values. How do we balance distinguishing between these firms and also the volume of applications we have to do without sounding generic? Absolutely. And this isn't to say that sometimes some of your applications might seem similar, particularly if firms are very similar. But I think it comes down to doing a bit of competitor analysis. So even where firms are sharing similar values, there will always be differences, because if they were the exact same firm, they wouldn't exist. I don't think you can have exactly the same company and compete against each other. There's got to be USPs that set them apart. So what are their USPs? What makes them different? Every firm does things differently. So find out what that is and find out which one you prefer, which one resonates more with you and why. I think that's how you really can distinguish between those companies and make sure that your applications are not generic. I always recommend having a bit on your first applications. If you've done your research into the sector and your competitor analysis as well, you should be able to create a bit of a, I guess, an application's almost cheat sheet for yourself. So where you've got your ideal structured answer to applications, firm motivation, ideal structured answer for career motivation, and skills and competencies, going through each of the skills that employers within the sector are looking for, and then where in your experience you've gained those skills and where in your experience you've gained those skills or developed those skills. And then what you can do is, once you spend like a good amount of time building that out and understanding how you want to kind of word your responses, then with every application you can just kind of tweak those wordings to make sure that they're specific to that company and specific to that sector. But it means you don't have to write out the whole thing every single time you make an application. So as I said, every time you do it, you become quicker, but it's just making sure that you're not just simply copying and pasting things across, because firms can tell and see that. Marcus, when do you think is the best time to apply for spring summer internships? Is there an optimal time? So most application processes open around from September onwards for some of the larger schemes and larger spring and summer internships. But do remember that sectors differ. So some sectors open earlier than others. Law is always particularly early, obviously for vac schemes and things. But given the disruptions to COVID and things, I think things are becoming more regulated again and kind of back to normal. But particularly in the past year with the disruption to COVID, some applications opened a lot later. Some applications are still opening now or running for longer. Some are rolling. So do remember to just kind of build your research and understand when applications close. On Bright Network, actually, there is a free careers calendar. So on your profile, when you're looking at roles or looking at events, you can literally add them to your calendar and it will tell you when applications close for them and things. But it's always good to do some research in terms of the sectors that you're interested in, knowing when those applications open, who the key players are. Because if you know the key players in terms of the large graduate graduate schemes within that sector, lots of firms tend to follow suit of those larger companies. So if you know the big ones, then you should be able to get a good indication of kind of when to get ready for those applications. But my general kind of tip on that is to be prepared from now. Even if they don't open until September, even if you're not looking to apply till August, be prepared now, because you never know when an opportunity might arise. So best to be ready than kind of catch up. Yeah, I think that would be my top tip for that. On a related note of applications, what do you think constitutes a good CV? How do we best summarize a plethora of experiences to present in a single document of 1 or 2 pages? Absolutely. I think the key thing with your CV is to, and it comes back to my point I mentioned about being concise and to the point. So I know with the CV, it can really feel quite tempting to put absolutely everything on there, because absolutely you have done lots of stuff, even in your early career. So whether it's a university, maybe you've done quite a few internships and things, but not all of that information is going to be relevant, particularly after you've read the job description and read the the kind of, and you've done your research, there's key things that will really stand out to employer and will be relevant to show them that you have the skills that you need for the role, and some things that are always great to know, but you can bring that into your interview, or if you get a bit further ahead. All you want to put on your CV is what's going to get you in the door. So the key relevant stuff that's going to show to an employer and be able to almost be like a checklist, so they can see we're looking for someone who has X, Y, Z skills and competencies. Your CV should just tick that off for them and be able to show them, yes, this person meets the criteria in terms of what skills and competencies we're looking for, and then you can develop on that further in your interviews and things like that. But essentially, you just want to give them the most relevant experience, and then also give them an indication, a little bit of indication to your own personal culture and values. So in your interest section and what matters to you. So whether you're really active and sporty, or if there's particular things that you enjoy doing in your spare time and things, always helps, because it helps you build rapport with the person who's looking through your CV. Beyond that, I think, again, anything that allows you to stand out just that little bit more. So for example, if on the job description they're looking for someone who has had some experience with, say for example it's a marketing graduate scheme, and they want someone with some experience with email campaigns, or I don't know, something like using a software that you would be expected to use in the future, or perhaps you've done a module at university that you've been able to use a software or get an understanding of a particular process that you'll have to use on your graduate scheme. So for example, when I was at university, we did a statistical analysis, which is obviously quite useful, SPSS. I'm sure some of you had used it as well, which is useful in kind of research and analysis. So if I was going for a research role, I would highlight that I've done a module in that and that I know how to use those processes and to use those software, to show that you had that kind of little bit extra than the regular candidate. How do you think we can make full use of online networking platforms such as LinkedIn to build meaningful connections that might lead to opening doors of opportunities? For example, are we encouraged to send a chat to initiate a conversation when connecting with firms, recruitment personnel? Absolutely. So this is probably a whole nother webinar on networking, and particularly LinkedIn. But I just think the best tip I can give you is to be proactive. Don't be afraid about reaching out to recruiters. They're looking for the best talent. And if you genuinely believe that you could be one of those people that they're looking for, they want to hear from you. Absolutely they do. But it's really just being careful about and being purposeful about who you're reaching out to and why. So for example, the example I gave earlier, if you know someone who is an alumni of a university, who works for that company or went through the grad scheme, reach out to them, connect to them, see if they have any information to share with you or insights, and then see through building a relationship if they have any contacts that they can connect you with. Likewise with the recruiters, reaching out to them to ask questions about the application, maybe not the application process, not things that you can find out on your own. So if you can find that information out on the website and things like that, there's no point asking them, because it just doesn't, it first of all makes you seem like you haven't done your research, but you don't get much out of that conversation. So think about what's really going to help you to in the application process and to help you stand out and reach out with that purpose-driven approach. Someone asked, how do you manage to get your confidence again after getting rejected by the company that you want? I think one thing to remember is that I've been there as well. I've definitely been there where you've had a rejection from somewhere that you really, really wanted to work and you really felt like this was a place for you, and it just didn't happen. First of all, I know people that have had rejections from the same company multiple times, and then on the third or fifth time of applying, they've gotten the role. So if it's somewhere that you really truly believe that is meant to be for you, don't give up. Like it might just be that on that occasion they went with someone else, or on that occasion there was just someone slightly stronger, or perhaps they just had to make a judgment call and they just didn't pick you. There could be a plethora of reasons why you were unsuccessful, but it doesn't mean that you weren't good. This is why getting feedback is so key, because once you get the feedback, you can understand how you need to improve and make those steps to improve and come back stronger. And that's the whole point of resilience, is how you bounce back against adversity and come back stronger. But also on the flip side, you need to do a little bit I guess, soul searching and real deep analysis, self-analysis, to understand whether I really want to work for this company, but is it really the right place for me? If I've been rejected once or twice, does this mean that our values don't align? Does it mean that I might not enjoy the role? Does it really fit across to what I want to do? And take steps to maybe look at some other similar companies that you can maybe get some experience with first, or get some insight into, or maybe a spring week or an internship, to get an understanding of whether that really is going to be the best place for you, and just kind of analyze that a little bit more. There's quite a few more questions. I'll try and get through as many as I can. How do you stand out from a pool of bright candidates, and what, in your opinion, weighs the most? Academic track record, working experience, or extracurricular activities in determining whether a candidate can move forward with their application? Thank you so much for that question, Beverly. As I mentioned, I think it really can be quite varied. So there's various reasons why someone can be accepted over someone else. It could be their academic track record, it could be their work experience, it could be extracurricular activities. But the number one thing that I think really stands out is how you deliver those experiences and tell them about how you utilize those experiences to explain to the employer why you're the best candidate. So someone, for example, could have had all the relevant industry experience, worked for their competitors, worked in the industry, got good knowledge that way. And then you can have another person who hasn't had any experience, but has been kind of done lots of extracurricular activities, working with societies and things. And even though one of them on paper looks like they would be given a job because of their industry experience, if they don't know how to articulate that well, or use that experience to highlight to employer why they are the best person for that candidate, the person who did extracurricular activities knows how to say, this is what I've gained from the extracurricular activities, and this is how I will use it in the role, and this is what makes me the best candidate. The delivery from the person who's just done extracurricular activities is going to outweigh the delivery of the person who's done the actual industry experience, and that other person is going to be the one that stands out the most. So it's just something to think about. Obviously, the more experience and things you can get is always fantastic, but it's really about how you convey the experience that you have in a nice, clear and concise way to exemplify to employers why you're the standout candidate. So it's ultimately it's all about passion and communication. Mariana, were any of these pieces of advice available to you when you were applying for jobs and internships? To be honest, this is one of the reasons why I'm so grateful to work for a company like Bright Network, because I wish I had all of these insights when I was looking for roles and things during university. I don't think I really knew in my third year. I did a master's as well, but in my third year, what graduate schemes and such were, or the differences between them. So I think having access to a platform like Bright Network and being able to understand that and gain those insights as early as possible helps you start working towards those goals that you have, and developing your employability skills as early as possible. So that when you come to your final year and applying for grad roles and things like that, or your second year and applying for back schemes or whatever it is you're doing, you'll be much better equipped to tackle those hurdles and to stand out and to do well. So to answer your question, I think those pieces of advice were available, but not as clearly and not as candidly as they are now. And I think employers now more than ever themselves are doing a lot more work in terms of supporting you through the application process and helping you to understand what makes a great candidate for their company. So get involved in those initiatives and go to those virtual events and go to those insight evenings to make sure that you're getting those insights as early as possible. Another question came in. A lot of the things we hear are advices, and the things that really matters to put those into practical side of stuff. Are opportunities like this, for example, really practicing a mock interview, or even to practice a networking simulation session? Are opportunities like this available with Bright Network? From Wilfred. Thank you so much for that question. So we do a range of opportunities for networking, particularly where you can kind of build your networking skills, put it into practice, and actually network with employers as well as network with other students and things. So absolutely, there is lots of opportunities like that on the network. Also, whenever you have like an application or an interview, you can always kind of connect with Right Network talent team for support with that, to kind of talk through things and kind of help you get prepared. And there's lots of support to help you to practice things like psychometric tests and things on the academy. So there's a vast range of resources and support in terms of that as well, to really help you put those that knowledge and advice into practice. Excellent. So I've got time for a couple more questions. I'm just going to pick out a couple of those. Yes, so I'm going to go for Khan's question. What to do when not knowing what career path you really want to follow, or what career path you really want to be in, how to get experience and feel of the career, in contrast to internships, which requires dedication when you only want to explore. The best way to do this is to obviously connect with people within the industry first of all, because if you connect with someone who's come from your university, I think that's always a nice way to get connected with someone, because if they went to university, they've been in your shoes, they're always a lot more keen to kind of support someone to follow in their footsteps. But that really can give you an insight into the career, and getting someone to be maybe not a full-on mentor where they have to kind of dedicate monthly time to kind of sitting down with you. They might not be able to do that, but even just dedicating a 10-minute chat, sit down and talk to them, 5-minute chat about their experience and what it's like to actually work in a firm can really unlock that door into that sector. So I know sometimes being on the outside can feel quite confusing to understand what it's actually like, whether you want to actually pursue it. But having that conversation with someone can really unlock that door for you and help you to see a bigger picture of what that might be like for you. But in contrast as well, I think attending events is such a great way to do that. Going to employer events or Bright Network events where you can actually hear from the employers themselves, understand about what their roles are like and hear directly from them, ask them questions, is the best way to understand whether it's going to be something you're interested in. And if those conversations spark your interest, I think it's always worth then exploring further for an application, interview or whatever. But that's my top tip for that, I think. And I think that brings me, there's one more question relating back to CVs. How much does the aesthetic look matter? Would using colours design to help make a CV stand out? Or would it make it come across as unprofessional? I think personally, but this was me with my marketing head on, I personally really like when I see someone have a really put thought into their CV structure and how it lays out. Not only is it more helpful for me to be able to read, if the structure is aesthetic, as in the structure is clear and formatted in a way that just aids reading easily. So I can see everything that I need to see very quickly by the layout. That's a great CV. But I think if you're looking to go into creative industries, it probably matters a little bit more. So for example, if you're going to more corporate industries, I think it's more about the content of the CV more than anything. I think just having it in a clear, structured format with clear font, just black and white, is absolutely fine. They're not that bothered about the colors and everything and doing the branding and stuff. But definitely within the creative industry, if you're interested in going down that path, I know I've seen things on like LinkedIn where someone got their CV, obviously name scrubbed out, but posted on like LinkedIn by companies like, it's a sweet company called Candy Kittens, owned by Jamie Lang from Made in Chelsea. He posted someone's CV that they sent into them because they branded their CV like their Candy Kittens packaging, so like the sweet packaging, and that really helped them stand out in a way that made them actually post on their platform their CV. Now, that's incredible. I think sometimes doing something like that and going a bit outside the box, especially when you're trying to show your creativity skills, you can really do that in the way that you put your CV together. So I think sometimes it's a great consideration to think about when you're looking at creative roles. Sometimes it could be something so simple as if you're looking to apply to a marketing agency or to, like a creative firm, fitting it to their branding, using their font colors and things, using applications like Canva, free graphic design tool that is really easy to use, and you can find most fonts and find most colors and things. It's really easy to use, so I think that's always worth looking at, just to go the extra mile. But generally speaking, if you're looking at corporate roles and things, well, I guess generally speaking for everything, content matters most first, and then the little extra bits can add at the end. So that's everything from my side. I think that's all the questions as well. I think I've just finished time-wise, but thank you guys so much for your questions. Thank you for listening as well, and do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well, and connect with Bright Network as well for any support going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Ogilvy, for the engaging session. I'm sure our delegates will find the tips helpful in their next applications and interviews.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Certainly today has been an incredible journey of education and knowledge for all of us who've joined us today. We hope that when you go your separate ways, you will still continue to apply the conversations and advice that we have all been involved in and received today. Once again, we would like to thank our distinguished guests for their wonderful and insightful talks. Additionally, our huge thanks also go to all the delegates for your engagement, as well as our supporters, ASEAN UK Business Forum, Singapore Global Network, and Bright Network. We value your comments and would love to hear from you regarding today. Please do check your inboxes for the post-event feedback form that will be sent to you after this event. To all dear delegates and guests, we would like to let you know that the Warwick ASEAN Conference will commence again tomorrow at 10 a.m. UK time. Don't miss out on the opportunity to engage in invigorating ASEAN discussions in the Economics and Politics panel, as well as participate in our networking sessions with partner firms and embassies engagement sessions. Should you know of anyone who still wishes to join us tomorrow, but have yet to register till date, do drop us an email at outreach.warwickasean@gmail.com. Do follow us at Warwick ASEAN Conference on Instagram and Facebook for updates and notifications. This has been your MC, Haley, and on behalf of the organizing committee, we thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you again tomorrow.